Welcome to Beyond the Margins, the podcast, the place where we engage, educate, empower, and elevate. I'm your lead learner and host, Dr. Sohn A. Each week, I sit down with some of the brightest minds and dynamic leaders in education to challenge traditional narratives, especially those shaping the experiences of students at the margins. Together, we explore new ways to reimagine schools, classrooms, and learning communities as spaces for growth and transformation. At Beyond the Margins, we center students too often overlooked, sharing the stories, strategies, and ideas that matter most. Voices long pushed aside are brought to the center. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. Did you know that more than 5.3 million students in the U.S. public schools are identified as English learners, making up to over 10% of the nation's student population? And that number continues to grow every year. That's according to a 2024 National Center for Educational Statistics report. But multilingual learners are not students who are behind. They are students carrying languages, cultures, histories, resilience, and untapped brilliance into our classrooms every single day. Today's conversation is an important one because we're talking about what it truly means to educate students through an asset-based lens instead of a deficit-based one. We're discussing belonging, representation, culture, language, hope, and the power of creating learning spaces where students don't have to erase who they are in order to succeed. Today's guest is Miss Nitza Rivera, an educator, advocate, and strategist dedicated to supporting multilingual learners and their families. Drawing from her experience navigating education between the Bronx, Puerto Rico, and Maryland, Ms. Rivera has spent years helping schools better understand the cultural, emotional, and instructional needs of multilingual students. Her work centers around belonging, access, engagement, and helping educators shift from deficit thinking to asset-based practices. Please help me welcome Ms. Nitza Rivera. Welcome to Beyond the Margins. Today we're in for a treat. Welcome to the show today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm so excited.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I know you're doing a lot of good work in the community. You've been an advocate and an educator in this space for a long time. So please tell some of your backstory to the Beyond the Margins audience.
That's like my favorite thing to share. So I am the only child of Puerto Rican parents who I would say migrated to New York City, to the Bronx, and lived there for like 15 years. I assume my first language was Spanish, but I went to school at that time. No ESOL, no any support. Just have a great day at kindergarten, learn some English. So I lived in the Bronx for like 11 years. Once I finished elementary school, my family decided to move back to Puerto Rico. And guess what? I was not literate in Spanish at all. Nothing. So I always say that I took a crash course in both English and Spanish because once I was back in Puerto Rico in middle school, I was la gringa. So I had no Spanish skills. I had to learn from scratch, read and write and everything. And I guess I always say that's my biggest accolade. I am a multilingual learner.
Yeah. So I'm sure that had a lot to do with your identity development, not only around culture and education, but as an individual, as a person in this world. So how did that integrate into your educational journey?
I always said that I wanted to be what I did not have. So while in New York, I did not have any ESOL teachers. While I lived in Puerto Rico, I lived there for 19 years and went to school and everything, but I did not have a teacher that would take in my skill set and then just like advance it. I always say like I was left at that like on limbo with both languages. So I always wanted to be that I didn't have. Culture and biculturalism was very prominent in my family, but I did not have the tools, like I said, to be able to incorporate myself within the culture. I lived on the island for 19 years and then I decided to move to Maryland.
Yeah. And so, your journey sounds to be very unique in the sense that, in the Bronx, there was the challenge of language. In Puerto Rico, you bump into this challenge around language again. Then you find yourself in Maryland.
Well,
As
sir, in Western Maryland.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and that matters, right?
Yes, it
In
does.
West Maryland, because that's not like the 95 Baltimore,
Mhm,
corridor.
mhm.
So
Yes.
how was that? Because that's not, that's a culture shock, a culture difference to be sure.
Yes, and that's all I knew. So I knew the melting pot of New York, and I knew, the rich culture of Puerto Rico. But when I came to Western Maryland, I had the language, so that wasn't an issue. But I didn't understand the nuances of the culture of that encompassed the area that I was now living in.
Yeah.
I always share the joke about like how I visited Penn State and I had a Penn State shirt, but when I would wear it around here, they would like, "Hey, I see you, Nittany Lion. Hey," and I was like always confused because I didn't go to school in Penn State. Just, found a nice. I was a tourist and I had a nice T-shirt that I liked.
Yeah.
So I didn't. There were little nuances of the culture that I didn't comprehend. Even with the Spanish language, for example, like I learned it at a later age.
Mhm.
I learning that those rules of grammar were a challenge.
Yeah.
So when I came here, I always thought, well, I'm not going to put myself in a space where they can't understand what I'm writing. So I began typing and texting in all caps because in all caps, you didn't need to put that little accent mark
A little shortcut to bypass the challenges.
until I was told, do you know that when you type or text in all caps, it's like you're screaming? And I was just like, thanks, boss. That's great to know, as she
Yeah.
was my supervisor at the time telling me this.
Yeah, that's amazing, that language and culture are so interconnected, and that, language is not just the written and spoken words, but it's a lot of those nuanced pieces that can go miss by people who are, native to a language or a culture.
Yes, and you don't think about it until you're, like, immersed in the space.
Hmm.
Because me, I came here very similar. Like I said, I always say I had the language, but I came here to Maryland very similar as a lot of my students. I wanted my children to be bilingual like myself. I wanted them to experience education in the States. And there was a period of time where I had to leave them. I had to leave my family, the place that I knew that was familiar,
Hmm.
and experience the unknown and start from scratch, build community, because that was another part. Everybody was interconnected back home, either in the Bronx or either in Puerto Rico.
Yeah.
But coming here,
Yeah.
everything from the moms in school to meeting people at the gym, everything had to be literally built from scratch. So
Yeah.
I had a true understanding, and I lived and I take that experience very deep to heart because I know what a lot of our multilingual students experience and
Yeah.
their families.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about engagement on a lot of different levels and belonging and connectivity on a lot of different levels. But let's talk specifically now about student engagement.
Mhm.
And, what does it do to a multilingual learner to have their language and culture either sidestepped or diminished in a learning space?
It can, I always say we have the power to either form or deform a student. It can make or break them, right? Because the engagement for me, it's not just like seeing them clicking on the computer. It's not just them raising their hands. It's more of, oh, that person in that text looks like me. That person sounds like me. And again, bridging the gap between what we want them to learn, but also what they already come knowing. So,
No, I'm sorry.
yeah,
Continue.
no, no, no. So that makes a huge difference
Mhm.
because, again, similar to my experience, there were things that I could not relate to because it was, again, I didn't go to Penn State.
Right, right, right. And I think it's so important to remember, and we're going to talk about this a little deeper as we get into it. I think a lot of times we see multilingual learners in a dominant setting of English, right? And
Mhm.
we see them as somehow deficient, when the truth of the matter is language is a program, and there's not necessarily any academic deficiency, cultural deficiency. It's just a matter of language programming. I know you've seen that in your work. Can
Mhm.
you speak to that kind of deficit thinking that centers around the difference in language?
So we automatically tend to look, like you said, at what's missing. We
Mhm.
tend to look at, oh, they can't read and write in English. They are here. They don't understand the school system. The US school system is very different from let's say the school system in even Puerto Rico as part of the US, but also in South America, Central America. So when we come here, we're like, this is all new, but we don't come as as a blank slate.
Right.
We come with our experience. We come with vast knowledge and vast skills that, when once embraced and valued, we can transfer into the new language. So go ahead.
No, no, and no, that's the crux of it, right? Because every young person, regardless of language or background, into this space bringing experience and some form of expertise. And so you were getting ready to touch on that.
Yeah, because that's, I always say that becomes the basis, right? So we know that a student that is literate in their native language will acquire English skills a little quicker because,
Mhm,
again, they have the skill set. It's just transferring from one language to the other.
mhm.
So when we look at students, we always have to have the mindset that we're looking at them as full of assets. So we have that asset based mindset, right? What do they bring that I can propel into the new skills, the new content, the new level of engagement within the school setting? You know, when we talk about our students, what can they do? So once we flip that script and part from what they can do,
Mhm.
it just empowers students, one, to be more active in their own learning, to take more ownership. It lessens their anxiety. They feel more willing to take risks instead of the opposite, when we think about it as, oh, they can't do this or they can't do that. Then that limits already the student. It puts a barrier on top of a barrier.
And sometimes it creates a barrier when there was no barrier,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm. Yeah.
So, what are some other common misunderstandings that schools are having when they're trying to implement programming for multilingual learners? What
I
are some
think
common mistakes we find?
So I think it's very important to have, even if it's a minimal understanding of how the school systems run in other countries.
Mhm,
Because we can have students that are coming from any country in Africa, let's say. They either were taught in British English, they are fluent in French, and they probably also know some other dialect from their area. So
mhm.
we cannot make the assumption that they're coming from outside of the US, they do not know any English. So understanding the school system. In South America, there are countries that have a school year running from January to November. So if we have a student coming from, let's say, Guatemala, and they just finished a fourth grade in their home country, we they come into us usually in that winter gap in between, like, the holidays. Think
Mhm.
about it. We're going to place them in a fourth grade level. They already passed that. But are we going to have them go into a fifth grade level? They will be again behind. So in order to make those decisions, we really need to look into the individual student.
So, is what you're telling me, Nixa, that that's not the practice generally, that when a student comes from an international or a foreign school, that we're not, course setting, grade setting based on their home school from their home country? We're not doing that system wide.
The thing is, Dr. Bus, that sometimes we lack the resources to make those decisions
Okay.
as rapidly as our students are coming into our classrooms, into our school systems.
Gotcha.
So when we do not have access to those resources, we have to kind of work with what we have.
Mm.
Usually will be with if students come with any documentation, but we know that that's also a barrier because some students don't come with any documentation, and getting access to school records and things like that from their home country is challenging and timely.
Yeah.
So we have to make these decisions rapidly, but we also have to make these decisions thinking about multiple aspects, multiple factors. And sometimes school systems are forced to just either put them in a grade level by their age or, trust that they understand the grade level that they finish and that they're coming into. So it becomes a challenge when we don't have access to bilingual staff that could read those records. We don't have access. Some students come as unaccompanied minors. So we
Mm.
don't have access to any
Yeah.
kind of school documentation from their home country. So there's multiple factors that impact our assessment as to where students should be placed in terms of courses and grade levels. Uh,
Yeah. And it brings to mind too, I often, as a native English speaker, think of multilingual learners in terms of Spanish and
mhm.
sometimes French because of West African students. But that's not the only students you encounter in systems. In
No.
fact, there are dozens of languages in every school district. Can you speak to about the variety of services needed for all of these different languages?
Well, I have students that um, I worked with, and I particularly work with now, that she was not only an English learner, she was also a Spanish learner, and she's coming from a Spanish-speaking country. But in the area where she lived and was raised, they had their particular dialect. So she was never exposed to Spanish, never and of course not exposed to English until she comes here. So she's learning, that's why we consider them multilingual learners, because she was learning Spanish side by side with English.
Yeah.
So we think about, oh, well, all these students are either Spanish speaking, or like you said, there's pockets of languages, but even within the pockets of languages. So I'll give you an example. Like when I use Spanish, I usually have to train my brain to use what I call neutral Spanish, because when I address a Spanish speaking student, they don't always comprehend what I'm saying,
Mhm.
even in the language that we are both using.
Right.
So even within the languages that we know that are prominent within our area, within our school system, even within that, there are also smaller pockets of languages that we need to kind of address as well, because they're all in our classrooms.
Are there any particular languages that are more underserved in your experiences, like ones that are like hard pressed? I think, Spanish is one of those ones that's in our
Mm,
forefront.
mhm.
But are there any languages that are truly underrepresented by the services offered?
Well, we have it. I always say it goes by cycles. So sometimes we have, depending on what's going on in the world, we have students prominent from those areas with those languages that are sometimes not typically what we normally would experience with.
Mhm.
So it's like Middle Eastern, like Farsi. We have students that um, we have Arabic families. We have Arabic students here that are, I can say, prominent, and they can, and we have, when their families move in, they move in like I said, like in pockets. So we have people that can speak the language,
Mhm.
can help us with that process. But we have, I know languages like, we have families that speak Russian, but we also have families at one point that came from Belarus, and they spoke like a different kind of Russian. In other words, they spoke Belarusian. And
Right.
we were like, uh, we only had one variety. We didn't have all of them.
Right.
So I think it varies depending on, like I said, it's influenced a lot by whatever is going on in the world right now.
Okay.
We had students again in Western Maryland that came from Afghanistan, and we were trying to find ways to communicate with this family because we didn't have nor we didn't have a bilingual interpreter for that language, nor we had resources within our school system for that language. But again, it was the period of time, the things that were going on in the world, and these were the countries that were experiencing wars and were just coming over.
True. How important is representation amongst educators, counselors, translators, educators in general? How important is representation? Students being able to see people, educators who look like them, sound like them, and can relate to them culturally.
And I'll add another layer.
Please.
In positions of leadership, in positions that they would not normally see themselves in. So, that is near and dear to me because I always say, I'm a first generation for a lot of things, and I always thought that representation matters in the aspect of belonging.
Mm,
That assures that a student feels a sense of belonging. Again, there are matters out of our control that we can't, foresee that will be beneficial to have a person or not, or even situations of location that would impede that. But you can see the difference with a student that sees themselves in the person that is trying in that adult that is trying to help them, in that adult that is pouring into them. Once they feel welcome and a sense of belonging, that makes a huge difference.
yeah.
That makes them want to be engaged. That makes them want to learn more. That makes them want to show mastery, show what they know.
Mhm.
When we don't have that, as much as we say, we only need to know English because we're teaching them English, it still is important. Representation matters immensely. We see it with parents and family involvement. We see it with activities that I mean, 2 years ago, we had like 15 freshmen that were all multilingual learners for
Mm,
the first time go to prom. So that wasn't something that we did.
right.
So they went to prom and I always say they heard their top 3 Spanish songs and we were like that was the best thing ever.
Yeah,
That
yeah,
was just at an event with music that was familiar to them. So
yeah.
imagine if that was in their classroom, in their office of counseling, in their, speech or OT therapy. Like that matters. It just matters and the sense of belonging, I think it's imperative.
And these are easy inroads to building connection and relationships with young people. And we know that one of the number one factors of if a student decides to engage with academics in school is the relationship and do they feel a sense of connection and belonging. I,
Mhm.
I want to add one more thing to it. When you talk about self-determination, one of my favorite theories is self-determination theory. And there's this role of autonomy to and relatedness. Not only do I feel related, but inside of the group, do I get the freedom to express who I am and be who I am in a real and authentic way. So that's always so important to me.
And it's again, it bridges that gap. There's that gap of where I am versus where I want to be.
Yep.
And bridges that gap because they see a sense of hope. They become active participants. You mentioned autonomy. They own their learning.
Yeah. Yeah. That's when you see the magic and the light bulbs click off and you
That's
don't have to force it anymore. They're now engaged. They're asking questions and leading the learning journey. Yeah.
and
So
it's where that we talk about the filter in the world of ML, but that's where risk taking
mhm,
comes into place,
yep.
and that's what we want.
Yeah.
I always think about children, like little children that could not speak the same language, but their main goal is just to play. So they're going to shoot out words that they think or use mannerisms or anything that they think that is going to get them to their goal.
Yeah.
They want to play.
Hmm.
When we have older kids or we have students that have not had those experiences, we have to build them to
Yes.
get them to that place where
Yeah.
they feel so comfortable that their goal is to communicate or their goal is to understand, and they're gonna do anything no matter what comes out if it doesn't make sense. I mix up words all the time, and I say them so confidently that you will think that they make sense sometimes,
Yeah.
but it's not. You just have to take risks, but it's important to create that environment.
Yeah, as you're talking about this, what comes to mind is, you've raised kids, I've raised kids. When they're little and learning how to walk, what we do is we prepare a safe place for the adventure, right? We set it up in such a way that it enables them to learn the skills they need to. So it's super important to prepare the learning environment so that they feel safe enough to take the risk.
Mhm.
If the kid falls and is padded, they're more likely to get up and try again. And so we have to create that padding for them.
Beyond the Margins will return in a moment.
Your Divine Journey, LLC, is here to walk with you through life's ups and downs. Whether you're seeking therapy, life coaching, support, or personal consultations, we provide a safe, empowering space to heal, grow, and step into your best self. Your journey is unique. Let's make it divine. Connect with us today and start moving forward with clarity, confidence, and peace. View www.yourdivinejourneyllc.com.
At the Travel Bureau, we are dedicated to creating bespoke luxury experiences for the discerning traveler, specializing in detail-rich journeys designed with heart and intention. We turn your dream getaway into a beautiful, curated reality. Wherever you're going, the Travel Bureau will get you there in style, comfort, and joy.
If you're teaching urban, alternative, or non-traditional students and wondering why engagement feels harder than ever, the new book by Dr. Sohn A is for you. Unlocking Student Engagement isn't theory. It's real strategies for real classrooms, built on trust, relevance, and relationships. And educators across the country are already responding. Unlocking Student Engagement debuted at #1 in cultural pedagogies, philosophy and social aspects of education, educational professional development, and educational certification and development. Grab your copy today wherever you buy books, and let's change how engagement shows up in our classrooms. Welcome back to Beyond the Margins.
So let's flip the coin. What consequences do students experience it when schools or classrooms intentionally or unintentionally leave culture dynamics out of the instruction and learning process?
Frustration. Our students don't see past their current realities. Sometimes their current realities are hard, they are challenging, and not being able to see that aspect in their education, it shuts down hope.
Hmm.
It
And, and the hope is the one thing we can't let get extinguished, correct?
No, no, no. We can't because like I said, when we talk about the students that are multilingual or they're learning or they're um culturally diverse, they don't come like a blank canvas. So when we don't engage and embrace that, then again, the opposite, we shut it down. So we're dimming the light that they come with. And once that happens, again, it just leads, like we mentioned, when they see themselves in positions that they normally would not think to be able to reach. So it's the flip side of it. So they are like, well, this is what I have. This is what my circumstances is all I could do. And it just plummets their learning. They don't see a way better.
Yeah. And it's almost stealing the American dream if that thing is real, right? Because most people historically have come to this country for opportunity and advancement. And to take education from the mouth and hands of children is to undermine that very basic principle of what we call America.
And I'm so happy you said that, but because I always think that independent, right? We're not going to get into politics, but independent of the things that are happening with all these countries, whatever, at the end of the day, there is some level of optimism that they bring to us, that they bring with
Mm-hmm.
themselves. So they do come here. I experienced it. That's why I came here. I wanted betterment for my children. I wanted my children to be bilingual. I believed that the United States school system was rich and was worth having to leave everything that was familiar for us to come and be a part of that. I always joke around because I say, in the Bronx, I had like a gymnasium, and in Puerto Rico, we had like, outside court. But when I came to enroll my son, like this dude had a stadium in his school. I was like, I never had a stadium.
Yeah.
So imagine if, because he did not know the language, he would not be able to play a sport, or he would not be able to engage in other extracurricular opportunities. We look at, independent of the circumstances, I am a firm believer that we need to set that aside and look at the student, look at the individual that's there. And when we look at their families, see it as such.
Yeah.
Because many, if not most, come searching for a better way of life because their countries are either extremely violent, extremely poor, extremely uneducated, a lot of extremes.
Yeah.
And we kind of, like you said, we kind of block that. We kind of give them a poor experience, an experience that they're not good enough, or they don't know enough, or they're not engaged enough, or, they don't sign the 100 papers,
Yeah.
forms that we send out, and how dare they? And then again, we shut down, like we dim their light, we shut down their hope.
Yeah, yeah, and that's super unfortunate. And when people are looking for that light, and so what role does family engagement play in supporting the necessary structures to make sure a multilingual learner gets what they need? What role does educators in the school system and family engagement play together?
It's such a strong bond when they come together. One of the things I strongly believe in is having opportunities, or preparing opportunities for families to be active participants in their children's education.
Hmm.
And this goes beyond the elementary school years.
And beyond, like International Day.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
all right.
And the
Okay.
thing is, like, information is so key. And like just how we want our students to learn the culture, the language of, just let's just say, our school. The same thing happens for our families. Again, I remember, and I can tell you stories upon stories. I remember in elementary school, in our school district, we had outdoor school before COVID, where students would leave and be in this beautiful area learning all kinds of science and all kinds of amazing things out in nature. They had to stay overnight for 3 days. Dr. Butts, there was not a school year that I eventually became an orientation session in Spanish, because that is not what we do. We don't send our little babies away to stay
For
somewhere
3 days overnight in the
in the
woods. Yeah.
woods. In the woods.
Yeah.
So we had to, similar to like the example of prom, we had to.
I think my daddy might have been Puerto Rican too, because he didn't believe in that either. Yeah.
About that life. That's funny because my children are 12 years apart. So when my oldest was a senior, my youngest was a kindergartner. So, and he would say that. He would say, "You're so lucky." They would talk among themselves and say, "You're so lucky. Mommy let you do so many other things that she didn't let me do."
Yeah.
One of those things was have sleepovers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by the time she was a fifth grade, I was just like, "Okay, go ahead, STEM."
Yeah. So I'm the youngest in my family, and parents, the first kid, they're trying everything for the first time, but the last time they're like, he won't break. Just
He will be fine.
it'll
Yeah.
be fine.
So
Yeah.
and that's what happened with a lot of our fifth graders. Our fifth graders were like, "Ms. Rivera, you have to call home. You have to call home because my mom will not let me go to outdoor school." But that were like different experiences like that. It was just sharing the information. right?
Yeah.
We have this saying that you know better, you do better, but you can't do unless you know.
True.
And a lot of it was information. We saw it particularly with our high schoolers and their service learning hours. So they would reach senior year, junior year, and they're like,
No hours.
I thought I was gonna graduate.
Yeah.
They're like, no, you need XYZ hours. So it was also like telling these parents, like, this is what they've been doing. You just need to make sure that you share with the school, the counselors. It's just so powerful because similar to the students, once they see themselves, they feel welcome, they feel like they're seen and they're heard and they're valued.
And welcome.
Yes, and
Yeah,
they become your biggest asset.
absolutely.
Your biggest asset because they want to, they just don't know how to be active participants. But once you give them the tools, the information,
Mhm.
that's it. And again, it comes down to making sure that school districts and school leaders take that into consideration
Yeah.
because you don't think about it. So when you don't think about it, you don't provide the opportunity. So for us, there were a couple of leaders that I worked with, and I would share with them these crazy ideas at the time. But then later on, they became a staple in the school. And
Mhm.
because they became a staple in the school, families, not just the Hispanic families, but any family that was non-English speaking was active and participating.
And that's why I appreciate the work that you do, because you shine light on what would otherwise could very well be blind spots for people who are native speaking, right? And so that's why the work you do is so valuable and important. So let's change gears and let's get into the classroom.
Okay.
So what can teachers do immediately to improve how they're engaging with multilingual learners in the classroom?
Don't translate. No, I'm just kidding.
Okay.
Just don't translate.
Don't translate.
I don't know if you picked up, I always use my mannerisms and I'm always moving around. I'm always using my hands and things like that and expression. That's it.
Mhm.
That's key,
Mhm.
right? Um, when we look at engagement, we do not want to enable,
Mhm.
right? We want to challenge because that's how we take them to the next level, right?
Mhm.
So when we look at engagement, sometimes little tweaks are going to be big determinants of their success. So when we talk about um, vocabulary, right? We need to teach vocabulary within the context.
Yeah.
It needs to come natural. It needs to come normal. It needs to come with examples. It needs to come with visuals, right?
Mhm.
But we also have to kind of test it out. So finding ways to assess on a continuous basis,
Mhm.
continually assessing, because you want to make sure that I read an article about how a cell phone gives these little hits of dopamine, right? And
Mhm.
that's why we have them in the morning. We're always on our cell phone. It's the same thing with our students. We want
Yeah.
to give them those little wins to make sure that they see the progress. Those are their hits of little dopamine, right? So
Mhm.
we have to consider exposure. We want to expose, again, when we're thinking from that asset-based mindset, we want to expose into maybe they have the skill set. Let me expose them to this new way of thinking or this new way of writing or this new way of demonstrating mastery to see if they can trans language, which use their language, their culture, their knowledge, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And incorporate it into the new concepts, the new skills, the new knowledge.
Yeah. There's a great documentary you've probably seen. It's called Educational Subnormal. It's a documentary on Caribbean students, Jamaican students in London, when a lot of Jamaicans were migrating to the UK in the 60s and 70s. And they were taking these Black kids and labeling them basically mentally deficient or mentally defect based on interest tests that were really just a difference in language. So they would show a kid a picture of what they call a faucet, and the kid would call it a pipe. because in Jamaica, faucet is called the pipe. And so they would use this as their reasoning and their logic for labeling students in this way, when truly that's a learning opportunity. And that's when multilingualism becomes an asset, because now they have pre-existing knowledge and they can, exponentially add to it.
Yep, that's what you
Yeah.
do want. They don't like I'll say that over. They don't come as a blank slate. They don't come as a blank canvas. They have a skill set, and it's also like when you look at this. I don't know if it's current, if it's not. Where school can be fun.
It can be, yeah.
Uh, so we look at ways of everything. Well, not everything. Let me rephrase that. A lot of the content being exposed to student being see, I got myself caught up with my words. A lot of the content that we want to expose students to, we use it to play.
Yeah. Gamification.
Yes.
Yeah.
So we want to that's for me, I love that. Like, I'm hands-on, and I always think about like how I learn and how my students might learn if I'm their teacher, because again, all over the place, but it works. So I
Yeah.
always think about that. So you can tap into so many things there. The students that are competitive, the students that are collaborative, the students that are the leaders and the decision makers, they can come together, and again, through say it again, Doctor.
Gamification.
It's gonna take a minute to get it all.
I'm here for you. Yeah.
They would not even think that they're learning, but there's so much that comes out of it that, again, the engagement part that you talk about, it's just so crucial, but it comes in a way that's natural, that's fun, that is, appealing, attractive, and also they don't know how much they're learning because they're embraced in it,
Yeah.
engaged
So
in
games and play are like the universal language.
it.
You take a group of 2-year-olds, they can be from any part on the planet, just put them in a room with a ball,
Yep.
and they'll figure out a game. They'll create a game. They'll create words for the game. They'll create all the actions needed. And people generally will do that. So it's really about teachers, educators not providing that safe space for students to do that with one another. So I'm glad you brought that out. Teachers don't always have the skill sets to make these leaps. So what should school leaders be doing to support their teachers in better providing these services for multilingual learners?
Let me see how I say that the Bronxanese in me doesn't come out. First of all, we need to check ourselves. We need to make sure that our personal biases are not coming through our leadership skills. Or our leadership roles, not skills. So we also have to check with ourselves our own fears, because a lot of the decisions that we might make or not can stem from that. The fear of the unknown,
Absolutely.
or the fear of what might happen, or the fear of, will I get it right the first time? Because even educational leaders, we're still human. So we still have that. We still have our little, dash of ego, plus we have our dash of
bias, all of it.
All of it, right? Yeah. And we are also a wealth of experiences and such. So we have to open up our lenses to make sure that we are taking in consideration a variety of aspects, right? We need to make sure that, again, that we make, as leaders, we also make it a safe space for our educators to be willing to take risks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I had a principal that he was one of my greatest mentors, and he would always say, "Here comes Rivera. I wonder what you're going to bring in now, what you're going to ask for now, what crazy idea you have now." And he was always welcoming to the creativity, the innovation, because even if I would get it wrong, which many a times, they would flop, But I went back with another idea, went back with another suggestion. So making sure that the safe space that we want to make for our students, we also bring for the adults that are working with our students.
Yeah.
Um, have difficult conversations, have those hard and courageous conversations where we are truthful to what we know and we don't know. Because if we're not continuing our learning, we're dying. If you're
Yeah.
not growing, you're dying, right?
Totally.
So if we don't have these courageous conversations when we hold each other accountable and we say, "Hey, I'm strong in this area. If you're willing, I can help you grow with me."
Yeah.
Those courageous conversations just build up the connections within the school, all the staff in the school, and the school culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
That and that again, that is what our students perceive.
Yeah, it's so important that we lay down our, ego, pride, and become more vulnerable professionally in the interest of doing work for the young people, for the students we serve. I think that's so important. Um, Over your career working as a multilingual educator, what has it taught you about resilience and, the human connection needed for effective education?
I start my introductions with my biggest and my best accolade is that I am a language learner.
Hmm.
But not only that, that I know what our families experience when they have to come and start from scratch, somewhere that is unknown. So that builds a sense of trust. And I'm okay with sharing that. And I share that as to, oh no, I did this. No, I worked here. Oh no, 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 no. I share with I came here with 2 suitcases, one with books and one with my clothing. And they were like, "What?" And
Yeah.
I said, that's how I came here. So it's not far-fetched. I think being able to share our own personal experience, I love that you touched on vulnerability because that is empowerment.
Yeah, yeah. We don't do that enough. Like, we have to share our stories. Our stories empower people. Um, a lot of times it's professionals, not just educators, professional in general. We kind of paint this like image, like we got here. But why don't we tell people how we got here? Tell young people a path and show them through our own testimony and example. If there was one thing you can change in the multilingual educational landscape and you were sure that it would change tomorrow, what would be that one thing you would change?
Oof, Dr. Butts, that's
You got a magic wand, you
that
wave it, it happens. What would you do?
so in my ideal world, and I have gotten a little bit of pushback with this thinking, is that when we have what we call newcomers, students that have no English, I always envision that these students would participate in some kind of like English boot camp where they would gain the foundational skills in a short period of time where they were, and here's where the pushback comes when we're saying, oh, well, we're segregating students or we're not having them immersed in their home schools. But I think that students need a little bit of incubation when they come in and they do not know any English.
Yeah.
And that period of incubation varies student by student.
Mhm.
So I know in the state of Maryland, we have international schools and such and such. But imagine if within an international school, and I could be, stating something that's already being done, you would have these stages of early, let's say early intervention where the student would get 3 months of intensive, just foundational English instruction. Talk about these students that come in mid-year.
Mhm.
We would not just throw them into a classroom. We would have them, we will build them up, we'll build up their confidence. And within, again, depending on each student, we would then transition them into the mainstream classroom.
Yeah.
I receive a lot of pushback with that thought because people would think, well, okay, you're pulling them away from their communities or you're pulling them away from their home schools. But you think about specialized schools. So my youngest was never in her community school or in her home school
Right.
because she was an art student.
Right. Right.
So she went to the magnet school, the magnet middle school for the arts, and then went for a high school for a school for the arts. So she was never with her peers from within her community. And you
Right.
think about that students that go into our tech programs, or you think about students that go into our magnet programs for whatever, they're not always with their peers and immersed with their community schools. Even when we have students that transition into alternative education, that's not a one size fits all.
That's true.
So imagine that we would look at the student and we would design a multilingual education program or an English language education program for them that would have that incubation period, and then we would send them off. Some students come to us that do not even know how to use a computer, and here's your Chromebook for school.
With English, and use it in English.
Yes.
Yeah.
So imagine if we had that period of time for those students to be able to acquire these in a safe, in a confidence building environment.
Yeah. Setting a strong foundation and going slow enough to be able to go fast sooner.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
What advice would you give to a teacher who may be struggling right now to engage their multilingual learners? What's a baby step, a day one step that they can take to better engage the students sitting in their room today?
Well, the babyest step will be just smile.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
just smile. Just listen, you don't know, I don't know, we're gonna learn together.
Yeah, for sure, for
Yeah.
sure. I've seen multi-language learners in a classroom be overlooked the entire class period, or students or teachers worse talking to the interpreter instead of the young person or the student. And so those small things, interaction, a smile is universal.
Yes.
That's a good first step, and everyone knows what that means.
And moving into that, again, always give them the option, right? Always give them the option of saying, no, I'm not ready, or no, I pass, or give them a signal that is just between you and that teacher, and you and that student, you as the teacher and the student, to be able to identify when that student is not ready. Because again, I love what you said. You're going to get them to move a little slower in order to then make them move faster, because again, they're going to build that sense of belonging and that sense that my teacher, they know that I'm not ready, but they're not giving up on me. They're giving me opportunities to show when I'm ready.
Right.
Just giving, and again, like, never, I mean, here comes the Bronx and East. Don't dumb it down for them. Don't lower the bar. Don't have low expectations. Don't part from, oh, well, they can't, or they don't, or they won't. Part from an asset-based mindset. Maybe they could do this, or maybe they could do that, or maybe they can engage this way, or maybe they can show me what they know in another way. Always parting from what they can do versus that exclusion or that just moving them aside. Always, again, make sure that they are active participants. And seeing the student, not their language, not their culture, not their country of origin, not their parents, not or whoever they live with, not how they got here, not how long they've been here, just seeing that individual.
Yeah, individual student looking to be educated. Hey, look, Miss Rivera, I knew this would be an outstanding conversation. Thank you so much for your insight. Hey, listen, can you tell the Beyond the Margins audience how they can maybe follow you, or something that you maybe have that you're working on, any projects?
So yeah, so you can follow me at SpanishForAll.com, and that is where I provide strategic planning, strategic support for culturalization and things like that. Or just follow me on Facebook.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, thank you, sister, for doing your warrior advocacy work. I see you. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
You are family to Beyond the Margins. In any way that I can help you, let me know. And we'll love to have you back at some point in the future and continue our conversation.
And thank you, Dr. Butts, for giving me the space and the platform to share and for helping with those big words that I'll probably have to practice.
Absolutely. And so just so you know, we're going to do like a swap because my Spanish is next to zero. So Paquito Spanish. Yeah. Hey, look, sister, I'll talk to you soon. Continue doing all the great work that you do for us. Thank you.
Same for you.
All righty. Today reminded us that multilingual learners are not problems to solve. When schools create spaces rooted in belonging, representation, and high expectations, students don't just survive academically, they thrive. I wonder, what would our schools look like if every multilingual learner walked into classrooms where their language was seen as an asset instead of an obstacle?
Next time on Beyond the Margins.
How would you define student engagement? How do you know it when you see it?
Student engagement can come in all different ways, even if it's not at a high level. So we look at rigor, right? What's the level of rigor in that classroom? Because I can be engaged at a very small level to a very high level. You can ask me to read this passage. I'm engaged in reading this passage, but I'm not fully learning from it. That light didn't go on. I didn't ask questions. So I think one of the main indicators of high levels of student engagement is questioning. And if the student is curious about something, you hit something, it's like, wait a minute, that made a connection. Questions and connections.
Thank you for joining us on Beyond the Margins. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, share this episode, rate and review the show, and let's keep the dialogue going. If you would like to connect, email me at Sohn@beyondthemarginsllc.com. That's SOHN@beyondthemarginsllc.com. It's been a pleasure being with you. Until next time, keep teaching, keep learning, keep leading, and keep pushing beyond the margins.